Welcome to the debate. Today we're tackling a really fundamental question in psychological well-being. Where should our primary focus lie for stable, sustained mental health? Is mastery realized through direct neurocognitive practices like mindfulness-based interventions, or do we have to prioritize the holistic management of systemic and environmental factors? I'll be arguing that the most potent path involves that deep internal work that, structurally changes the brain.
And I'll be presenting the case that we really need these comprehensive external building blocks of well-being. Look, while internal capacity is valuable, and I don't deny that, I maintain it's just not sufficient to guarantee long-term stability, unless frameworks like Perma+4, which account for our environment and our physical reality, are addressed first.
So, the strongest evidence we have for sustained mental health improvement really lies in these neurocognitive practices. We often group them under the term mindfulness-based interventions, or MBIs. And these practices don't just teach coping skills. They actually induce measurable, lasting brain changes. We see a fundamental restructuring, enhanced prefrontal cortex volume, and, this is crucial, improved functional connectivity. This is the communication pathway between the brain's emotional center and its executive control area. This biological enhancement, it directly leads to improved emotional regulation and reductions in symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress. For instance, a simple focused practice like 6-6 rhythmic breathing, it's a direct, trainable method for improving the resilience of the autonomic nervous system. You're essentially training the brain's internal off switch for stress.
Okay. That's an interesting point, though I would frame it very differently. Neurology gives us the potential mechanism, sure, but it's the external context that dictates whether that mechanism can even be reliably accessed. We argue that standard psychological models like PERMA are, they're incomplete because they overlook the external drag that modern life imposes on us. This is what led to the expansion into Perma+4. This model incorporates the 5 standard pillars, but it adds 4 external building blocks: physical health, mindset, environment, and economic security. Systematic reviews actually confirm that including these 4 external factors explains significant additional variance in well-being. So a purely internal focus is just perpetually destabilized if the external foundations are, crumbling. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the structural changes MBIs provide are enough on their own.
Relying purely on conscious, cognitive control is, it's highly prone to fatigue. Habit neuroscience confirms that long-term success comes from reducing what they call activation energy. That's the barrier to starting a good habit. We have to structure routines and leverage external cues to make the desired behavior easier, rather than forcing this effortful internal regulation whenever we feel stressed or tired. That effort fights the brain's autopilot system, which is just not sustainable.
But you suggest self-control fatigues. But isn't the whole point of MBIs that they fundamentally lower the activation energy required for regulation over time? The neuroplastic change we observe is the exact mechanism that interrupts those automatic, maladaptive thought patterns, things like destructive rumination. This isn't just coping. It is a measurable structural enhancement that makes the intentional choice the new low-effort default. That improved communication between the emotion center and the regulatory area ensures that the cognitive effort is sustainable, precisely because the system itself has been upgraded.
Acknowledges that cues in our surroundings have a tremendous influence on our behavior. If systemic conditions like a toxic work environment, chronic sleep deprivation, or a lack of economic security, if those aren't addressed, internal practices are perpetually fighting an uphill battle against overwhelming external factors. If the conditions are structurally unsound, asking people to just meditate harder is often insufficient, and frankly, it ignores the necessity of addressing basic human needs.
I see why you emphasize those structural barriers. I do. But what tool is more fundamental than the ability to mitigate the internal, destructive effects of those very stressors? The consistent efficacy of MBIs across wildly heterogeneous and difficult populations, from caregivers to people facing severe chronic illness, it demonstrates a core ability to enhance resilience and mitigate the effect of stressors, regardless of the challenging external context. Home practice has been shown to predict real-world improvements in clinical outcomes. This confirms the internal routine is powerful enough to drive functional change, even when the environment itself resists.
The scientific literature strongly supports that practices like MBCT and MBSR create deep, lasting neurobiological shifts. They enhance our fundamental cognitive function and emotional regulation.
I believe these practices provide the essential internal tools necessary for inner mastery and ultimately for sustainable well-being.
The value of internal practice is clear. I'll grant you that. But optimal well-being relies on optimizing the entire system. Understanding the holistic framework of Perma+4 and the science of habits suggests that integrating internal mindfulness skills with the intentional management of physical health, environment, and economic security, well, that offers the most comprehensive roadmap for true, sustainable performance.